It's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and today I'm going to be addressing a huge kind of controversial topic in the cake community, and that is whether or not it's okay to sell cakes that are made from a box or if everything should be made from scratch. And the reason that I'm talking about this today is because I actually discovered not too long ago that a lot of people were using box cake mixes to sell their decorated cakes. Now, a lot of these cakes were quite beautiful and quite elaborate looking. So I was actually really surprised to find out that many people in this community do use box cake mixes and they sell that to their customers. Now, I am going to be telling you about my opinion on that in a few moments. But first, let's get into it. So the first thing that I think needs to be talked about is what is considered made from scratch and what is considered using a box cake mix. So I think using a box cake mix is pretty self-explanatory. You're basically taking a box cake mix, you're following the directions of the box cake mix, and then you are making a cake with it. Now, homemade is a little bit trickier. So what I generally think a person thinks of when they think of a homemade cake is they think you're getting the sugar, the butter, the flour, you're all mixing it together, you're coming up with your own ratios, and then you are baking it and serving that. So that's the most straightforward explanation. However, I think things get a little bit tricky when we talk about the gray area of what if you use a box cake mix as the base, but then you add on all of your own things. Is that considered made from scratch? So originally when I thought about this, I thought, no, I guess I wouldn't call that made from scratch because you are using a pre-made mix as a base. Sure, maybe you might be adding in Oreos or something to make it your own recipe. Maybe you're using sour cream in place of oil or something like that. But I think that before actually looking into this situation, would have considered that not homemade. But now upon further investigation, I think maybe I would call it homemade. Because if we actually look at a box cake mix, what it's really doing is it's taking all of your dry ingredients and just mixing everything together for you. And then yes, it is explicitly telling you add this many eggs, add this much oil, and this much water in general. So if you are adding your own ratios of things, then I guess you're kind of making it your own cake. So what I decided to do to investigate this topic even further was I decided to put out a really informal poll on my Instagram that was basically just asking people if, as the customer, would be upset if they received a cake that they later found out was made from a box cake mix. And here are the results. So I was actually a little bit surprised. When I initially put this out, I found that a lot of people said no, they wouldn't be upset. But I let this go for about 24 hours and I saw that, yeah, about 50% or more would be upset with the fact that they received a box cake mix as their cake. So then I decided to have a little conversation with my friends, a lot of non-baker friends, and I asked them, how would you feel? And they all kind of said that they would be upset if they received a cake that they later found out was made from a box. So I asked them, why? Because essentially when you're paying for a cake, you're really paying for the decorations. Yes, the cake part itself does play a part, but let's say you ordered a naked 6-inch cake. It's probably gonna be in the ballpark of what, $30 to $40. But as soon as you start putting decorations on it, it almost doubles in price. So really you're paying for the decorations. Was kind of my thought process as I was kind of thinking through this whole debate. But when I asked my friends, they had this to say. It's not so much that they care about the fact that a box cake mix might taste good or not. The debate isn't whether a box cake mix tastes good, because I will admit some of them do taste fine in my opinion. And if I was looking at a highly decorated cake and I had a tiny little slice at a baby shower, I probably wouldn't notice. But it's two things at play here. One of them is when you go to a bakery, you're expecting that they're going to give you a product that you can't find anywhere else. That's why people don't just go to Costco to buy custom cakes. I mean, some do. But if you want a highly decorated cake, you're not going to go to Costco. You're not going to go to Superstore. You're not going to go to Safeway. You are going to go to a place that specifically specializes in cakes or cookies or custom desserts. So my friend pointed out to me that one of her big thoughts was that she wants something that is very, very exclusive that she can't get anywhere else. If she just wanted a box cake mix, then she would just go to the store and do it herself. However, we also did talk about the fact that yes, you're getting a box cake mix, sure, but that person is still doing all of the work for the decorating, and they're also making the box cake mix and using their ingredients and money to purchase those things to form into this beautiful cake. So her thought process was that she would only expect the cake to be maybe a little bit cheaper because it is made from a premix. My other friend, however, basically said, nope, it had to be homemade or else she would feel very duped in the situation. Which brings me to my next thing. The second thing that people seem to care about is transparency. So maybe people don't really care if something is made from a box cake mix, but they want to know if it's made from a box cake mix. And then I furthered the question and I said, but why? And my friend said, because then I probably would want the cake a little bit cheaper. And so that's why I think we get into a little bit of a sticky situation when we talk about box cake mixes being used for custom cakes. So before I share my own personal thoughts on what I think about using box cake mixes, I'm going to share with you what I did when I was running my at-home bakery and what I still do. I did always make everything from scratch, and I also made all of my fillings and all of my buttercreams from scratch as well. And I also even dabbled a little bit in trying to figure out my own recipe for a while. Finally, I found a different recipe that I really, really love. And even then, I was a little bit nervous that customers would come up to me and find out that I wasn't using my own original recipe or something like that, which is completely silly. So when I first began, I really was a purist when I thought about baking and when I thought about the products that I would be selling. I was really hung up on the fact that everything needed to be made from scratch and I needed to do everything the right way, or what I thought was the right way at the time. So to this day, I've never ever used box cake mix for a cake at all. I've always used everything from scratch. If I was selling to just friends or family and I was running low on time, then I would use a pre-made filling at times, but really that was on really, really rare occasions. For all of the public, I always used homemade fillings. But let's get into what I think about using box cake mixes. So to preface this, I actually don't think it's wrong to use box cake mixes, but I do think that it can cause a gray area for a lot of bakers. Now, I've spoken to lots of cake decorators before, ones that run their own commercial bakery, and some of them do bake from scratch every morning, but some of them do use a pre-made mix. Now, going back to my friend's point about how she wants exclusivity whenever she's purchasing something from a bakery for obviously a higher price than what you would pay at the grocery store, this fits in fine because premixes for bakeries are generally specifically made for that bakery. So you can't get it anywhere else. So it is very exclusive. For example, it's kind of like McDonald's. Yes, you can get chicken nuggets and fries everywhere for a cheaper price, but are you going to be able to find exactly the same taste as those chicken nuggets and those French fries? No. And does it even matter that it's frozen or it's from a pre-made thing? For a lot of people, no. So that's why I think in those instances, you wouldn't necessarily have to be super transparent and disclose that you're using a premix, because that premix, all it really is essentially putting in all of the dry ingredients together, and then the bakery has to do the rest of the work. But when it comes to just at-home bakers or maybe bakers that are choosing to purchase their premixes from the grocery store, that's when I think transparency is super, super important. But we get into that little sticky area where a lot of cake decorators don't want to be transparent that they're using Duncan Hines or whatever, because this could potentially deter customers. So I think before you use a box cake mix, you have to ask yourself the following questions. 1, why do you want to use a box cake mix? Honestly, for myself, I feel like it's just as much work to use a box cake mix as it is to make everything from scratch. Maybe it's an additional 5 minutes, but perhaps you have your reasons. Maybe you don't want to keep so many milk products on hand, for example. Maybe you really love the taste and you stand by those box cake mixes. Or maybe baking just isn't your thing, but decorating is your thing. You could have a plethora of reasons. 2, you have to ask yourself whether you'd be willing to be 100% transparent about the fact that you use a box cake mix, or if you use pre-made icings, that you use pre-made icings or pre-made frostings. Most of us use pre-made fondant, right? So it really isn't that big of a stretch. 3, is saving the amount of time using a box cake mix worth it to you? And if you're not going to be fully transparent right off the bat, because I understand that could be a bit of a deterrent, are you okay with divulging that information if somebody were to specifically ask you if you use a premix or not? In conclusion, I really don't think there's anything wrong with using a box cake mix. If that's what you want to do and that is the flavor profile that you want for your cakes, then by all means do it. I myself know a lot of cake decorators who are very into decorating the cake itself, but are not so much into the baking. I'm a little bit more in between, where I do like to do the baking and I love making the fillings, and I also love to decorate as well. So for myself, because I wanted my brand to be something that was authentically tasting like something that I would want to eat, that's why I made all of my fillings from scratch and why I continue to make almost all of my cakes from scratch. The key here is also to stay consistent. So if you start with box cake mixes and you start building up a customer base that continually comes back, then you've got to stick with the box cake mix. And if you start with homemade and they come back, you've got to stick with that then. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading daily, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!